Welcome to Fundraising Wells, the Successful Board Service series. In this edition, we'll be discussing our own proprietary MOPRO framework and the six core board roles. Let's jump right in. The five MOPRO domains cover the mission of an organization, outreach, programs, resources, and outcomes. Mission pertains to the organizational purpose, values, strategic direction, alignment with changing community needs. And the board's role in this domain is to set and regularly affirm mission, ensure all work aligns, and adapt the mission when warranted. In the domain of outreach, we're discussing community partnerships, relationships, visibility, reputation, and stakeholder engagement. The board's role is to extend their network, advocate publicly, and facilitate relationships representing the organization externally. In the domain of programs, we're discussing service delivery, program quality, participant experience, program evaluation, outcomes measurement. And the board's role, in conjunction with the executive director, is to monitor program health, ask quality questions, ensure the outcomes are tracked, and celebrate successes. In the domain of resources, we're discussing fundraising, grant writing, individual giving, special events, financial sustainability, earned revenue. And the board's role is to actively participate in fundraising, open doors, give personal support, and ensure diverse revenue streams. Remember, one of the core functions of a board member is to ensure the financial resources for the organization. With outcomes, we are talking about data, metrics, impact evaluation, accountability, demonstrating results to funders and community. The board's role here is to oversee the outcomes measurement, to review dashboards quarterly, and to ask, are we really moving the needle? With each of these domains, it can be very easy for board members to want to lean a little bit further in and reach a little further in to the staff's work. So we want to keep the board's gaze elevated, thinking about the strategic direction of the organization as it relates to each of these areas. How are we always thinking 2, 3 steps ahead so that the executive director and their team can run the present day to day? A few ways to help us do that is to anchor ourselves in the six core roles of being a good governance board member. The first role is the mission and governance guardian. This really sits in that MOPRO domain of mission and correlates to those fiduciary duties of due diligence and care. This role of mission and governance guardian requires the board to review mission statements annually and make updates if needed. To develop a strategic plan with board input alongside the executive director, meaning that you aren't just approving the ED's plan, you're actively participating in it. You might also show up as a mission and governance guardian when you ask questions like, are we still serving the right population? Should we adapt our model? Regular temperature checks are also a sign of good mission and governance guardian work. So asking, is every board member clear on our mission, is a good first step. Continuing this work, we might want to establish a governance committee that oversees board recruitment, development, and evaluation. We should also ensure the board bylaws are current and followed. And we should document board policies like the conflict of interest, whistleblower, confidentiality, and the executive director's evaluation. We should think about board size, composition, and committee structure regularly. And we should ensure the board calendar includes compliance checkpoints. When is the audit due? What other filings do we need to be aware of? And have they been calendared for us? When is that insurance renewal or other policy renewals coming up? These are all good functions of a mission and governance guardian. Here we've got a governance audit checklist for you. Share this with your team, with your staff, with anyone who is playing a role with you on the board, your auditors, and use this checklist annually to ensure that you've got a conflict of interest policy signed annually by all directors, that you have a whistleblower policy that is always accessible to staff with protected reporting mechanisms in place, that you have an ED evaluation process. It should be annual. It should include 360-degree feedback. That you've got a board member evaluation process. It should also be annual. It should include a self-assessment of each individual board director and a reflection on the entire board from each individual board director. Create a governance calendar. Include those compliance deadlines, filings, retreats, evaluations. Do you have an audit committee? You need to. What's the board meeting schedule? And how are you tracking attendance? What's the term limit policy? And who's coming up for either renewal or rotating off the board? How are you planning for that succession? And what's your diversity and inclusion plan as you think about growing your board? So this is a nice roundout of the mission and governance guardian role. Moving on to the second role, this is our ED evaluator and supporter role. This means that we are annually evaluating the executive director against agreed upon goals and competencies. That evaluation will include 360-degree feedback from staff, board, and the ED's self-assessment. That results are discussed in executive session between the ED and the board chair and committee, and that a compensation for the ED is reviewed and approved annually. Let me be clear here. It is not enough to simply place this in the organizational budget and approve the organizational budget. You have an obligation as stewards of the finances of the organization to review the ED's performance and their compensation annually. The executive director's professional development should also be supported. Now, in the supporter role, you aren't just approving ED decisions, you're co-developing strategy alongside them. Your board meetings should include substantive strategy time and discussions. They should not be simply updates for approvals. And your board committees should work on forward-thinking topics, a 5-year plan, a risk management, a market analysis. Your executive director and board chair should probably talk regularly, weekly, bi-weekly, potentially monthly. But the bottom line here is your conversation should not be limited to board meetings or preparing in the days before a board meeting. Some practical structure for building that strong partnership is for you to set up those weekly or bi-weekly calls. And in those calls, discuss any upcoming challenges, test new ideas, surface concerns early. You don't want any surprises. You could also think about some group work. How are you building task forces and working groups to own a piece of the strategy so that we aren't just reporting out, but we're engaging the board as active members in developing these items? Maybe you have an annual retreat, 1 day a year where you get to do a strategic deep dive, really assess the risks of the organization, looking at a 3-year outlook. And if you've got strategic time in meetings where you're dedicating a chunk of the meeting to strategic conversation, you'll be truly fulfilling that role of ED supporter. Some additional practical processes here are to establish goals in January. In June, hold that mid-year check-in. And in November, start to gather feedback. Discuss those results in December, and then approve in January compensation. If you need help setting up executive director evaluation goals, I encourage you to talk directly with your executive director about that. They are most likely craving some partnership from the board in developing those performance goals. And if you all find yourselves stuck, by all means, reach out. We're happy to help. Here are a few great ideas as well. Role 3 is the fundraising and financial steward. This means the board is reviewing monthly and quarterly financials, depending on how often your leadership team is sharing them with you and how often your board meets. Quarterly is minimum, by the way. The board understands budget assumptions and asks probing questions about the budget and the finances. There is an annual audit overseen by an audit committee, and that audit committee is comprised of only independent directors. The board is ensuring internal controls are in place, so there's a segregation of duties in the reconciliation processes. And I can't stress this enough, the executive compensation is approved by the board annually. Continuing on, the board is giving financially, achieving 100% participation. Every board member participates in fundraising. The board is educated about the donor pipeline and specific major donor prospects. And board members are opening doors and introducing the executive director to prospective donors, hosting cultivation events, bringing folks down to the site. The board is reviewing the fundraising plan and holding the executive director accountable to those goals. Fundraising is a standing board agenda item. I'm going to get slightly controversial here. This is a strong belief I have, having worked with multiple boards over the last 30 years. When I see organizations that develop a fundraising committee, I find that their board suffers in achieving strong fundraising results. And it's not the fault of the committee, it's the fault of every other board member not on the committee. Because what happens in that situation is each board member not on the committee says, fundraising isn't my job, there's a committee doing that. I have news for you. Fundraising is the job of every board member. So it's our philosophy here at Fundraising Well that you don't have a standing fundraising committee. We love building task forces and special working groups to help produce a gala or run the fall campaign or the board outreach campaign. But in terms of having a standing committee, it is the responsibility of the entire board. And we believe fundraising should be a standing board agenda item where every board member is actively playing a role. Some food for thought here. The Nonprofit Revitalization Act of 2013 says that organizations with 500,000 or more in revenue must have that independent audit committee, and the audit committee must review and approve the retention of an auditor, and they must meet with the auditor to discuss those audit findings and the management letter specifically, and the board must review the audited financials before filing with the New York Attorney General. A critical detail here is the independent director. These are directors who cannot be current employees and cannot have received compensation of more than $10,000 from the org over the past 3 years. This includes the executive director, staff, and any consulting arrangements. Some key metrics you should know in your role as fundraising and financial steward. What is the month-to-date revenue versus budget? What are the major expense variances? What's our current cash position? What debt service obligations do we have? And what's the balance of restricted versus unrestricted funds? A good board question to ask in the meeting is, can you walk us through the variance report and tell us what surprised you, what concerns you, and what's tracking ahead of plan? In role 4, we take on the persona of stakeholder and community advocate. In this role, board members are representing the organization publicly and authentically. The board is visible in the community, attending events, speaking on panels and networks, and the board advocates for the organization's mission in their spheres of influence. You are gathering stakeholder feedback. You are aware of competitive and environmental landscape. In the role of program quality, monitor, and outcomes, you're reviewing program data quarterly. You're looking at those participant numbers, demographics, and satisfaction surveys. You are asking questions about program quality. What are the outcomes? What's the participant experience? Where do we need more staff training? The board hears directly from participants or reviews participant feedback. You understand those outcome metrics. What are you trying to achieve? How do you know you're succeeding? And you are monitoring for program or mission drift. Notice, in all of this work, you are reviewing the outputs that your staff is putting together. Once again, you are not doing the work of the staff. You are reviewing the work they do, holding them and the organization accountable, and gathering all the information you need to help set the strategic direction of the organization alongside the executive director. Some good data to review are the number of participants served, participant demographics, participant satisfaction or outcome data, staff to participant ratio and staff qualifications, program revenue versus cost, participant retention and advancement. And so some questions you might ask are, what percentage of our participants achieve the primary outcome? What's that year-over-year comparison look like? Where are we losing participants in the pipeline and why? And how can we solve that retention issue? Have we noticed any trends in participant feedback? What's working or what's not working? And is the program staff adequately trained and supported to carry out this work? In our sixth and final role, we are the risk manager and contingency planner. And in this role, we are conducting annual risk assessments. We're looking at financial risk, operational risk, reputational risk, and compliance risk. We've got contingency plans for an ED succession plan, for a financial crisis plan, for key staff departure plans. We are maintaining adequate reserves in the finances. 3 to 6 months operating expenses is a good goal to aim for. We are aware of regulatory environment and any emerging compliance issues. And we are ensuring that insurance coverage is adequate for the size of our organization. Some 2026 key risks for nonprofits. They're expanding. We're now into cyber risk with data breaches, ransomware. We continue to have financial risks with funding volatility and economic uncertainty with inflation and global wars. We have a staffing risk. There might be an ED succession need or key staff retention. Our staff is burning out in far higher numbers across the sector than ever before. We also might be faced with reputational risk, social media, workplace culture issues, the use of AI, and compliance risk with those evolving regulations, potential audit findings not being fully addressed. These are all aspects of the role that we must take on when we are serving as a risk manager and contingency planner. Here's a helpful table to identify a few of the most common risks where we have to lean in and show up as this risk manager and contingency planner. Once again, we always like to highlight where the board has a role, whether they're driving or partnering with a staff member. Pay particular attention to that here. And ask yourself, what keeps me up at night about this organization? And then let's name it and let's plan for it. If you need help naming it and planning for it, by all means, please reach out to us at www.fundraisingwell.com. We'll be happy to learn more and to schedule a consultation with you. Until then, thank you and keep fundraising well.